our meeting to order. We have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Before I forget, Kelly isn't making it tonight. She was a little under the weather, so she called and said she wasn't going to come. I haven't heard from anyone else, but I think we're almost all here. Are we? What are we missing? Patty.
Patty called me and said she had a family crisis and wasn't going to be here.
And so Patty's not coming. Is there anyone else we're missing? So many of us now. It's hard to keep track. But anyway, thank you all for being here. And I don't think we've met since our budget passed. Because we've had so many meetings lately. So I'll just congratulate all of you for the work you did, and to the administration as well, and to the communities who came out to vote, which was phenomenal. Again, to think we had a record vote in the beginning of April. We had an even higher number come out for our last vote. So that's a real tribute to our communities and our community members and those who are engaging in the process, which is great. I'm thrilled. So,
can I say something?
Yes, I hope you will. Anyone should.
I was looking at the voting results.
Yep.
And comparing them. And my take was that those who voted against the budget, we didn't have any traction on them, and we didn't make change anybody's mind. The budget passed because more people came out to vote, and the more people voted for the budget. Stating the obvious, but it was not as interesting to know that.
I think we may have had a little bit of change for some of the, you'll always bring out a few more no voters when you revote and a few more yes voters anyway. I actually spoke to a couple of people who said they changed their votes, so I think there were some who did. But anecdotally, you're absolutely right. The numbers did not change substantially anywhere in the no vote, really.
Yeah, interesting.
So it is interesting, and either way, what's most important is that people are voting, and they did. So.
Well, the fact is we didn't make too many changes, so why would too many people change their vote?
But we did make changes. We did.
Made some.
Which I think was very important. Okay, so we've got call to order and introductions. You want to go around and introduce yourselves again? Some of you may not know each other. We have extra students here tonight. Thank you.
We got everybody here. That's good.
So we're going to start down. Let's start right down with Frank, and we'll come down the table.
Frank Rucker, the financial officer.
Hi, I'm Janina Gaspar-Beckstrom. I'm a junior here.
Sam Dutton, junior student member.
Evan Riley, junior student member.
Howard Iris, Wyndham.
Winrick representing Townsend.
Emily Long, Newfane.
Stephen John, superintendent of schools.
Doreen Dorfman, principal.
Mike Dolan, Townsend.
Vendel Ball, Brookline.
Twyla Holden from Townsend.
Bruce Parliament, Jamaica.
Ahmed Madavi, Newfane.
Jeremy Calloway, Newfane.
Great, thank you all for being here. And the next thing up is members of the public. And I'm disappointed to say, for the first time in quite a few months, we have no members of the public here tonight. So maybe they'll show up. And when they do, we'll go back to this part of it. Correspondence. No correspondence? You check the box? You're pondering?
No, my only correspondence had to do with some other districts.
Okay.
Sorry.
Administrative reports. So principals up first.
Sorry for sending you guys so much. It's been a busy time. They got to be quite lengthy, and there was still more to say.
Let's just make sure everybody got your report. Did everybody get it?
Maybe the students, do you know what she's talking about?
They got copies of it.
Okay.
Anybody want a copy? We're all right?
I think they were emailed around.
Yep.
Last week.
Maybe not.
Please don't think that this was sent in the list in order of importance. Sometimes it all feels equally important, but I'd say the most pressing. I did inform Emily actually during when we were gathering receiving the information on the budget votes. I let her know so it was about a month ago, about the graduation rate, and that it would be lower this year significantly than the past. I actually have had a chart for months of the students' progress because there are so many we are worried about, plus remembering all those who started at 9th grade. And I wanted to share with you where we're at because it will have an impact. It's one of the measures for determining a school's adequate yearly progress, but in theory anyway, every Vermont school won't be making adequate yearly progress come August when those results are released. So that's the least of my worries. And of course the greatest of worries is convincing the students to remain another semester or year in order to graduate high school, because they will be much more successful in their lifetimes if they graduate high school, much more than if they get a GED. Fortunately, we do have 2 students working with the program in Brattleboro, the high school completion program, but we still have quite a number of students at risk, and at this time we definitely know that the graduation rate is 18% of the students who started in 9th grade. And as you see, comparing that to previous years, now the way the state calculates it is they have some kind of other formula. So does that mean if I look at, so in 2011, if it's 2.5%, does that mean next year it's going to be 18, 20, 24? I'm not sure what the number is going to be, but it will be significantly different. I did list very generally some of the interventions that have been made, and I did ask Sarah Grasso, our high school counselor, to share with me a list of interventions that have been in place, and it's very lengthy. So if the specific details of the amount of work and the kinds of work that has been done with the students over the last, not just the last couple of years, I mean, it certainly goes back, but when it became apparent that they were not making grade level progress, moving out of 9th grade, 10th grade, and certainly by 11th grade, we're starting to look at, okay, the end date's supposed to be June 2014. So I can talk about this as long or as little as you want me to. But it was imperative from Emily's point of view that I bring this to the attention of the whole board. Because of the, there's not much more public than graduation. So.
Are the efforts at intervention included, you have them, efforts include tutoring, school counseling?
Mm-hmm.
Are there a lot more than those? I don't want you to read them necessarily, but I'd like to see them if you...
There were also a number of interventions involving Debbie Haskins, who is our consultant around grief and recovery, and she has designed and led special events for the senior class ever since September 2012, and several sessions this year as well. And while that's about social emotional work, primarily emotional and mental health, that's all part of the picture as a barrier to student achievement, and engaging them to keep them even coming to school.
Thank you.
I would say that our teachers have been tremendous in bending over backwards to meet the needs of students. You need these many points to graduate. This is the, going back a year or so, this is the work you need to do to make it up, because they realize that once a student either doesn't walk or doesn't is able to walk, being 2 credits short, but fails to make them up, is a real sentence of what can happen next, and limiting their future. So while there's certainly deadlines and work completion, there are certain courses that if you don't do the U.S. history paper, you don't graduate. And so that incomplete will stay until it's done. But I'm just amazed over and again by the measures our teachers are taking to support the students. Anything else about graduation?
Do we have any data for for other schools in the area? Individual schools?
I know we're a little bit higher than the state average generally, but that's all I can tell you. I haven't made a comparison between us and Twin Valley or Green Mountain. Again, what I calculated, the 18 or 22%, I'm not exactly sure how the state comes. Do you know how the state comes up with their formula? I mean, I know it's a set 9 through 12, but
Well, they go by the kids who are in. They have the numbers of the ID numbers for students when they do their testing. So that's how they trace whether kids are missing or whether they're going to homeschool and then coming back and so forth. But it is a pretty strict 4-year cohort group. There's another. They will report eventually on the number of the percentage of students who take another year or go to 5-year, graduation, which I think is in many ways much more, indicative of what's going on with the students. This particular class has been, I actually was middle school principal here when they entered, and we certainly in the middle school team took some extraordinary measures and tried to come up with instructional groups, within the curriculum in math and language arts particularly, and certainly it caused great debate for me and the teachers at the time, because we really didn't like the idea of segregating or having kids split off. But there was a core group of students in this particular class that did warrant that kind of intervention. But I regret to say it hasn't been as effective as I would have liked. But I think we need to look carefully at each individual case. Every student's situation is individual, and then through the aggregate of those cases, try to figure out what we can conclude or what measures we should be taking with any entering 7th grade to ensure their success to graduation. There isn't any pattern parallel among other schools that I know of, and if that's what your question was asking, Bauman. This particular 7th grade, well, it was a 7th grade at one time. Anyway, this particular group of students coming from descending schools that were particularly needy. And I hope that the measures we're taking at the SU level collaboratively in terms of professional development make it more possible for the entering 7th grade to be performing better universally among all the towns and all the sending towns. So, we should be particularly, I presume Grim would be sharing with us if we knew specifically there was something else coming up for next year's graduating class that was nearly in this realm. But in the past, we've always been at the 90% or above, 88%, something like that in terms of the graduation rate. It's a problem, and I think it should be used to inform us about envisioning the future. What are the elements of Leland and Gray that need to be retained instructionally in terms of program that we can sustain, 5 years from now or 10 years from now? That's really how we need to use this kind of bad outcome, regrettable outcome.
So, Doreen, you put in your report about this being an anomaly, and I think certainly that is true. We clearly don't have a graduation rate like this other years. You also mentioned that there's another class coming up that is also on the radar screen of a concern. This is no small thing, whether it's an anomaly or not. This is failure, and we've somehow, and there's no one to blame specifically, clearly we have implemented a bunch of things to try to prevent this from happening, and I appreciate all the efforts that have happened, but we absolutely need to take this really seriously, and especially if we know that there's another group who are coming through the school system. One of the questions I've had a community member call me concerned about this. There's concerns about what happens to those. I know there's 11 students who, it sounds like, have currently dropped out. What happens to those students after they leave Leland and Gray, and what is our responsibility? Is there any responsibility for Leland and Gray? And the other question I have is there any information we can take from this anomaly, this high number, that can inform us? We've had quite a busy year in the legislature this year talking about a pre-K-12 education system, and some of the evidence and anecdotal evidence and data that is driving some of this conversation around a pre-K-12 education system is that, you know, there are students whose needs aren't being met, and it's all over the state. And there's discussion around whether Act 60 and 68 need to be revisited because, you know, it was supposed to provide an equitable education for all students. Then that clearly is not happening anymore. Whether it ever did or not, I can't say, but it certainly did better than it does today. And there's a gap that's happening, and we're all aware of the FRL students not making it. Boys seem to be doing less well as girls. There's a lot of different categories that we need to pay attention to. So what I would ask is there any information you can take from this anomaly that we have that can help inform a discussion at our SU level, so that we can make sure that we are providing the sports for children before they enter 7th grade? Because it seems to me that if what Stephen is saying, that this class came in as a 7th grade with needs, that means they had needs prior. And we need to absolutely make sure that those needs are being met at the elementary level. And we are 52% of Wyndham Central this year at Leland and Gray, and we need to make sure that the work is being done to meet the needs of our students at an earlier level. So those are kind of my thoughts about this, and I have lots of other thoughts about it, but I don't know if you could respond to any of that, either of you.
Well, that's certainly our investments in the consolidated federal grant for Faunus and Pinnell work in the grades K through 6, and that's in language arts and in math, the non-negotiable expectations at each grade level. And it's going to take a consistent period of time to see the results at the 7th grade level. We certainly have seen some promising trends. You know, 2 of the elementary schools in the SU certainly have been recognized for their investments in professional learning, and the principals have been recognized for really what can only be seen as exceptional, if not, you know, extraordinary achievement and improvement in student performance. And one of those schools is Wardsboro, which 90% of the students come here. Now I can tell you that, you know, before Rosemary Fitzsimons was at Wardsboro, that was not the case. And in fact, when she arrived, it was not the case, and for many years, it, you know, was the trend line put into place that was because she invested in professional learning, actually ahead of the other elementary schools in this SU, but about a year ahead. So I think there's reason to think that we've taken the proper steps, or at least some promising steps. The challenge still will be for the exceptional child, the student that is motivated differently, and that is a question that perhaps I'm optimistic that our work on the personalized learning plans will help address, because I think students that have a personalized learning plan will be obliged to consider what it is they're interested in and what they're doing, planning on doing in the future, so that they are more engaged in the coursework that they take, the courses, and realize that there is a purpose for them, rather than just as I felt like when I went to jail. When I went to school, I felt like I was in jail. 2 were pretty close to me in my elementary school experience. I remember looking at the clock and saying, "Oh my God, is that going slow?" You know. But anyway, that's.
So my question is, are we taking away anything from the loss of 11 students already, and possibly more, that may not complete, even though they, I guess, haven't dropped out? Mm-hmm. Are we taking any information from that? Are they coming from one town, for example, or are they high FRL, or are they, you know?
Well, the demographics about them is not, it's not appropriate for me to share, I think, with the board. Because
I think
you
that
guys
if you want
probably know
to
who they all
discuss
are,
the
so
individuals,
We absolutely don't want to do that.
But
But we
there was-
can say whether students, we're not meeting the needs of certain segments of students. I think we certainly can say that, and we should be knowing whether we are or we aren't. Linda?
Yeah, we had a Career Center board meeting today, this afternoon, and I brought this up as concern, and I mentioned about the 7th grade. And they were very, very receptive, particularly Anne, I can't remember her last name, but she's the guidance person at
Ann Dornan.
said any way that they can help by coming into 7th grade or working with kids that might want an alternate path to graduation, that they would be willing to do that.
Is that, I mean, there in itself is a question. Are we looking at students who need an alternate path?
I don't know that, but
that is not why
Okay, so that's
an
information.
alternate path is not what has prevented them from schooling. That when I look, it's the things that the takeaways and what we need to think about with the 7th grade, and in fact all of our students, is that in the state of Vermont, 20% of youth have mental illness. Of that 20%, 40% of them are diagnosed between the ages of 13 and 17. And and one of the most prominent ways that this reveals itself is lack of academic concentration, particularly in math, because the sequential thinking that's required is distracted by psychological problems. And early interventions in psychological problems and addressing things, believe it or not, like bullying, like barriers to attending school regularly, involving the parents early and often, and wraparound services for the students.
Early meeting.
Early,
before
like
Leland and Gray?
No. Well, I can't say what happens before, but I can say that I've had more conversations with elementary school principals this year than I have in my previous 3 years. Early meaning in September, when you start to worry.
I see.
Also, the teachers will be attending a half-day verbal de-escalation training next fall, so that when they have students with challenging behaviors in class, they can say, this is it, these are the choices, no negotiation. Because it's through that negotiation, which may sound positive, it's a way out of learning and a distraction from class.
I'd just like to add something. I think the Career Center is moving, from what I'm gathering, Stephen obviously tends to say, they're not seeing themselves in an alternative education. They're seeing themselves as the academic piece being, and they've gotten some recent grants to do that, being built much more into their program. So it was just a question, not of an alternative path, but of a path combining different things totally with the academic piece. Not even maybe taking them away from the, it just was I thought it was a nice offer.
No,
to try to
I
help.
appreciate the offer, but I also am not convinced that our students can receive the support services that they need in that wraparound small community way that we can provide. And
That's important.
yeah,
Point.
yeah.
Yeah, well, just to be aware, quite often it has happened that students who were seen to be benefiting from that opportunity at the Career Center then didn't have the self-regulation and the self-discipline to actually go to Brattleboro and come back without getting into trouble.
So this is a different type of
Apart from the
issue.
classes.
Oh,
That's a different issue.
No, I hear what you're
It's
saying.
well,
That could be a problem.
So we have to be, it's an individual decision and choice. Students have a choice to go there, and parents as well. So that's something that has to be weighed. I often had conferences with parents about that, exactly to what extent you have confidence that your son or daughter will be able to make the right decisions when they go down.
Twyla, just 1 second.
I'd like to know what was done to help these kids after they've made the decision that they're going to quit school. Real world, you're going to have to get a job. Do they know how to write a resume? Is there places in the area that provide internships? Anything like that to help them move on if they're going to not graduate.
So we do, the school counselor does meet with the student, shares information around the high school completion program, works with the parent.
High school completion program being completion after you drop out. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what our...
yeah, and through the agency in Brattleboro. Sometimes the students come back. Sometimes students who dropped out of Brattleboro, that is the Career Center, come back. And some are able to then successfully graduate, and some cannot. And unfortunately, it has a lot to do with what I was talking about before, around the level of services. School is really tough. I don't know. I mean, and I don't mean about the academics, but the you know, you think about
Clearly, for some students, that is true.
Yes, yeah, and I don't mean to. I didn't mean to say it that way, but I'm just I think back to the social challenges I faced as a normal teenager in middle and high school. If we think back about whether it was on the co-curricular or the English class, whatever it is, and then to be coming at it with a learning disability, because it's disproportionately students with special needs.
Well, that's important to know.
That's right.
That's important.
That's right. Yeah, which is not different from anywhere else, but having PTSD, which unfortunately young people do have from traumatic situations that they were exposed to. It's really hard to be. That's why I say school is really for those kids. It's tough.
So Howie has a question.
Sorry.
For comment. Right.
Not a question, a statement. It's a little politically incorrect to say, but not every kid is going to graduate high school. We're a public school, you know, and in defense of this school and the job that you guys are doing, administering the school, we're not going to get 100% graduation. It's a mirage that's been set up that is dooms us to failure. As long as this kind of thing is an anomaly, we just have to move on, learn from it as best we can. You know, we run great programs at the school. In the same, you know, report that you talk about the high rate of not graduating this year, you talk about raising the passing rate from 60 to 65. Well, that's going to make it more difficult for kids to graduate. Maybe that's going to up the dropout rate even more. But we're increasing the educational standards of our school, and it's a trade-off. So I don't. As long as this kind of thing is an anomaly, you know, we're a small school. It doesn't take many kids to throw the percentage, you know, way askew. We're not talking about a sample of 1,500 kids. We're talking about a sample of, you know, 50 kids, 60 kids. So I don't think we need to beat ourselves up too much about this. I think we should learn from it. If there's stuff to apply to another class coming in that's similar, that's fine, but this is reality. You know, it's not, we're a public school. We have to serve everybody as best we can, and not every kid is going to graduate. Unfortunately, this year, more than usual, and I'm sad to hear.
What do our students think? Do they have thoughts on this from a junior year perspective?
Yeah, I think it's pretty sad, and it's I think because we're, you know, learning along all these kids that you guys are concerned about. I think we kind of have a different view on it, or we have a different perspective on it, but I don't really know what to say about it other than it's sad. And I do think that there's not much more that the school could do from what I've observed, but of course, who knows what, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not.
I agree with Howie.
Yeah, I agree with Howie. Not everyone's going to graduate. It's unrealistic. I mean, there's only so much support we can give. The other thing is that I've definitely seen some kids become failed by the system here, or just by the entire system in general, support at home. They just didn't have it growing up. In school, they had behavioral problems because they didn't have eat their lunch because either A, they couldn't afford it, which is now not a problem because of supported lunches, but basically that once you get stuck in a rut of you're an underachiever, people look at you differently, and teachers look at you in a different light as that you're not going to amount to much, so I might just pass you on. And I've seen a lot of kids brag about how they got a 60 or 62, or they just barely passed the class by like 2 points. And when you move forward with that level, it's really hard to keep going because classes get harder and harder. So, but that happens early on, and we shouldn't really beat ourselves up over it's happened. It's just something we can learn from. Move on.
Thank you.
If that makes any
Go ahead,
sense.
Bob.
Do you guys have any thoughts about raising the passing grade from 60 to 65?
I like the idea. I think that we can't really make too many excuses. For some of the people are just kind of lazy, I think, and don't do the work. I don't think there's too many of them that are actually not smart enough to get a 65.
I agree. I think up until this year, maybe, I got good grades just because I did the work. I think for a lot of high school, it just comes down to either doing it or not doing it. So when you're getting lower than a 60, I think for the most part, you're just not doing the work. And we have a lot of opportunity to get support when you need it. So I'm also in favor of raising the passing grade.
You want to add anything?
I'm not sure if raising the grade is going to change a lot. It may just raise how teachers grade things. It may just change the standard of, like the curve may just change. I mean, sure, maybe 65 is now passing, but are we just going to grade a little easier to move the same kids along? I mean, there's, like, what do we have to put in place that doesn't turn 65 into the new 60? I mean, what makes that any different if we just start grading kids differently? Because that could definitely happen.
Just one more thing on that. I understand the anomaly piece of the dropout rate. And, sadly, probably we can't expect everyone to graduate realistically. But, I think we do need to, as other people have said, we need to be pretty concerned about this because, it is a large number. But if you go back and you start looking at numbers, it seems like every year since 2011, the rate of not graduating kids has climbed just slightly. We don't have 2013, but it's increased a little bit every year up until this anomaly year. I'm wondering, do we have a trend? Does that show us, are we missing some group? Obviously, you said we did everything, and this probably, the students said that, and they know more than we do, probably not much could have been done for this group of kids, and this is a true anomaly. But are we underserving some part of the population?
That's a great question about the trend.
It looks like it might be, and that just says, are we missing somebody? And you may not have an answer today, but it's maybe something we need to watch.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I'm seeing, in 2008 it was 3%, and then the next 3 years it was below 3%, and then there was a bump in 2012. So I don't know. Unfortunately, with the increased poverty in the country and in our community, that translates to lower achievement. Much more stress at home, much less support and intervention at home, and parents simply not available to supervise their kids. So it's not just about not getting homework done, but opportunity to do things that are really unhealthy. So I worry about those factors filtering into our school, especially going from a free reduced meals rate from 38 to 48%, and last year briefly being at 50. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think Stephen is right in the looking at the pre-K 12 approach.
Is our poverty rate higher here than statewide average?
A little bit.
And so our dropout rate is also higher than statewide average. I know we were only given 1 year, but I'm assuming from what you just said earlier that our dropout rate is slightly higher than the state's dropout rate on a regular
What
basis.
I've seen, it's been a little bit higher. I'm just recalling that.
Well, I'd like to just counter a little bit what I sense to be the tolerance for people not making it, or the expectation that some people won't make it. I've been to China a number of times. I've actually, my first teaching was in Malaysia in the Peace Corps. And those systems are premised on the fact that only the cream will rise to the top and only the best will succeed, and they don't try to pretend to educate everyone. Back when Horace Mann was an advocate for public education, he was pointing out that a democracy has to have people well educated to be able to make a decision to vote. You got to determine what's the lies and what's the truths out there. So, I'm just, kind of advocating for that expectation that while I don't quibble about the what is being stated in terms of opinion, it's real. I still think that as a public educator, I have to advocate for every child. I have to expect that when every child enters the school system, they will be successful. That has to be the goal and mission of our work and the investment of the taxpayer. Now, whether we succeed or not is what we're trying to hold ourselves accountable to now. And I think that is a tremendously informative debate, and it has to be informed by difference of opinion and by people stepping up and contributing to the conversation. I also was over in Keene recently, and I was walking around town, and they have a middle school that's closed down. It's a brick building, and there are these plaques up there at the top of the building that are in the stone for permanent, viewing. And I took a picture of this one. The education of the youth is the foundation of a state. Now guess who that is? I didn't know. I thought it was Horace Mann or something like that. It's Diogenes, Greek. Goes back a long way. Not that the Greeks pretended to try to educate everybody. I'm not saying that. In fact, the United States stands alone in its expectation that will happen among all education systems in the world.
And speaking of expectations, I would hope that it is our expectation that while we know it may not happen every year, that every student will graduate from Leland and Gray and be successful. So I hope that's always going to continue to be our goal no matter what.
I didn't interpret anybody's comments to be differently. I'm just calling attention to the burden that we share.
And again, I look at the work that the teachers have done. None of them have acted as if that, that one could drop out. I mean, really going the extra mile. And maybe that is represented when you see I didn't really work that hard and he squeaked by with a 60. But does the board have any other comment about raising the minimum passing grade? Because it would what's proposed would take effect next fall. And so just I don't think it's something that you need to vote on unless I'm mistaken.
No, I don't think we do.
I gotta say, I sort of agree with Evan. It's sort of like changing the dial on the volume control from 10 to 11 to make things louder. It's really, whether if the kids, teachers grade a little harder, then 60 is going to be harder to get, without making it to a 65. And if they grade a little easier, then 65 is going to be easier to get. So, it may have some symbolic meaning, but I don't know how much, I don't know how much effort it's going to take to implement. But it doesn't seem like it's going to make much of a difference.
There's a saying somewhere that I read that says, a teacher can open a door, but you can only go through it under your own steam. Mm-hmm. Now, it's up to getting the kids to be engaged, to excel in those classes somehow. If somebody's not interested in it, what do we have to do to try to get them individually, as a group, involved? If you're excited about something, you're going to be interested in it, you're going to learn more about it. That's, I think, what we maybe need to take out of this. I mean, I don't know the, statistics about those students and why they decided to drop out, but it sounds like, if they're saying, oh, well, they can figure out if they don't do half their homework, they're still going to pass. I don't know if necessarily raising the grade is going to do something to make them learn more if they're not interested.
It's so funny, I'm going to quote one of our teachers who said, the students are interested in the subject. They're not interested in doing the work. And so, and it was just about one particular class, but it was fascinating because the engagement was fully there in the ways that you're describing, but when it actually comes down to me and my homework.
Then how do we translate that so they are interested in pursuing that?
Well, then it comes through academic supports and building in structure in the class. Not that there's homework in class, but there's other means of accountability which is really necessary, particularly in the middle school level. But other comments? I mean,
Little has one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm afraid I disagree with it, for I think the reasons that Evan was saying. I was, because I don't think it, and I think Howie was also saying it, and I kind of take issue with the statement on the bottom of page 3, the antiquated practice of averaging effort and performance. In my old school, I worked with a tremendously gifted 7th grade social studies teacher, and there was one kid in particular that was not doing well, was not even achieving a 60. And this teacher realized this was a very gifted guitar player and a kid so invested in his music. And he asked him to come up with a guitar solo, and Stephen said this is being done in the building here too, come up with a guitar solo about the American Revolution, which is what they were studying in 7th grade, and do the research and make up the song to persuade the fellow students to engage in a battle, and even dress like that if he wanted to. And he gave him he gave him a high grade because of what he was able to achieve without taking tests or grades. And I wouldn't want to lose that piece, because as Steve and I were talking about it this afternoon, that's being done here.
Mm-hmm.
But when you read this, it looks as though you're moving into a standardized grading system and not taking into account these individual gifts of art, music, that could be equated into standing, academic standing, without a set grade. I don't think the set grade is going to make a difference. That's
But we already have a standardized grading system.
I'm sorry. Raising it to 65 is not going to. That's what I meant. Putting the emphasis there instead of somewhere else is not.
Is that what we're doing? Putting the emphasis there instead of somewhere else, or is this
It
just
looks like
an
it from
additional
here.
emphasis?
No, I
that's what
don't
I'm-
think that raising the minimum grade is going to have any impact on the inclusion of multiple intelligences and the ways that students can. So this refers to, there's achievement and there's effort. A student might be failing math class but meet proficiency on the state NECAP exam in math. And why are they failing math class? Because they never do the homework, that's typically it. They don't do that well on the tests, and so combined it puts them below the failure mark. And so the average base that you get on, the 97 or the B or whatever, it's averaged together, essentially. So that's what this is talking about. It's not about changing, it's not about standardizing grading practice to be that you described.
All right.
So I apologize for that confusion.
No problem. I probably misread
When
it.
I arrived here, there were classes in which, I know we're talking about this a long time, but there were classes in which student had passed the class but couldn't move on to the next level without a higher passing grade, like a 70. And I met with those teachers and I said, what's this about? If a student passes a course, the expectation is that they're ready for the next level. And they'd say, well, a 60 isn't high enough. They have to get a 65 or a 70. And I'd say, well, then, and I told them, then you need to modify your grading practice so a 60 actually is completing enough for them to move on. The same, this happened in foreign language and in math. And So because of that, there has been interest among some departments, though I can't say every member of that department, because you saw that not every wasn't 100% agreement, but a strong majority feeling that the students would be better prepared to move on. And as our students here said, that classes get harder as you get older, and so you need that background material in order to succeed.
What about kids that are, let's just say, taking Spanish 1, not taking Spanish 2? They have, they just want to get that credit. They get a passing grade, but is there a way that you could say to pursue Spanish 2, a passing grade would be 80 or whatever?
See, I don't think that's appropriate to have different passing grades for different courses. I think if you passed a course, you have mastered enough of the material in that course that you are prepared to move on.
Yeah, I'm not
You could put a
disagreeing with
prerequisite
you.
for Spanish 2 that you got at least a 75 in Spanish 1.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I just need to say that I think we're getting into a detail around this that I'm not sure is quite appropriate for a board to be doing. I think that this conversation and the request for us to agree or not agree with this is important, but
Just to get a feeling from the board.
but I would caution us to not, we're not educators, and we really need to trust the administration in being able to implement those types of.
Can I just summarize a little bit? I think all these opinions are really widely documented in the research about the impact of changing grades or changing the grading system and so forth. You're concerned, Howie, about the grade inflation but I came from the time when there was a bell curve, and the teacher would just put out a bunch of questions, and then you got an A if you were at one end, and you got a D if you're at the other end, or an F. And it really was a movable scale, which is, I think, kind of what you're reflecting in terms of what 65 means. Now, I would not be supporting, any change of the grading system or the passing grade in terms of a number, unless it's really with a step towards tying it back to the standards that we expect students to achieve. Based on the Common Core state standards and next generation science standards. Those are and we had the Vermont frameworks, the student expectations at each grade level for the other areas, art, music, phys ed, and so forth, history. So I think that I'm comfortable with doing something with the grading scale if, in fact, the school community and the students, that is primarily the faculty and the students, agree that it makes some sense and is likely to have a positive impact. My previous school, we had an 80% grade for passing, but it was tied back to standards. You could get an 85 in my math class if you didn't have the portfolio problem done, you didn't pass, you didn't get credit. So you can't have standards at the same time as you have this thing about averaging grades together, because the trouble with numbers is they average together and they don't really indicate how much you grew intellectually or in terms of your academic capacity and ability and skills from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, or the beginning of the course to the end of the course.
So this came out of a faculty council and student council and also a parent advisory group. So clearly,
and full faculty.
And full faculty. So clearly there was enough support within to bring it to us.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah. Any other comments, questions, any objections? Go ahead, Bruce.
Was there a conversation about what a student's expectation is? I barely remember back. If I wanted to get a 60, I'd look at it and say, okay, I need to do this. If I wanted a 70 or an 80 or a 90, I only had to do this amount of work. Is there some way to raise the expectations of the students so that they don't expect to just get a 60, that they expect to get more knowledge for a better grade?
So about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, is that what you're getting at? That they're wanting to learn for the sake of learning, the love of learning, and not only just passing to do what they need?
I think certainly I knew what I needed to do to get a 70. And even though I wanted to learn. But I think you learn what you have to do to get a grade, and it would be nice to be able to raise that self-expectation.
Maybe you guys could answer this question better than I could.
Well, I know what you mean. I don't really know how to answer your question, but I understand what you're asking.
Well, I think it's an attitude problem. It's about, like, when I come to school, I don't come here because I love learning. I come here because I want to do well in my life. I want to go to college. And this is what I need to do well in school. And this is what I need to do to move on. And I'm just here, and I'll take it, and I'll just grind my way through it, and that's that. I don't love coming here, to be honest. Surprise, surprise. Things like, I've always been savvy with computers, and I was exploring computer programming in middle school. And I learned some algebra concepts. I don't even know I was learning algebra concepts through programming. So I already knew the content in math class, and then the teacher told me to go home and do 30 problems at night, and that's what's going to get you a grade. And I said, well, I already know this, so I'm not going to do those 30 math problems, and because I don't care, because I'll just pass the test and that'll be that. And I got 70s and 80s, and I got mediocre grades, but it was good enough. So why was I punished for already knowing the material, but just not conforming to what the teacher wanted me to do? The attitude is that I'm not here for me. I'm not here to better myself. I'm not here to learn. I'm not here to become more intelligent. I'm here to fill a requirement set up by somebody who I don't even know, just so that I could pass a class. That's an attitude I get from a lot of kids, is that I'm not here for me. I'm not excited about being here. I'm here to grind for somebody else's agenda. And it's really sad because, you know, I'd like to pursue what I'm interested in. I'd like to want to do well, but I don't feel like I'm being challenged or doing it for myself. I feel like I'm doing it for somebody else.
I agree with what Evan said. I think that if you want to get people to do more homework, you need to make it relevant to the actual learning of the material. Or maybe not grade as much on homework and more on test grades, which might not work for everyone, but work for some of us.
When you go into I think they're called academy now, or peer tutoring center, study hall, you know, and you see the advisors that are there to help you, or that are there to, you know, continue doing it, and kids go, why do I have to do this? And I say, well, because the teacher assigned it, and that's what you need to do. I never hear the answer of because you'll learn this, or because you'll see this, or because you'll become enlightened. It's not about making a breakthrough. It's about getting work done. It's not about learning. It's just about getting from point A to B, and for reasons unknown.
I think that sometimes you have to sort of have an act of faith and trust the people who are asking you to learn, because it would be very time-consuming to walk you and explain why every minute concept is essential to move on to the next one. And basically trust the quality of the education that that some very qualified people who are basically dedicating their whole life to this are asking you to do. And if every step doesn't make sense, sometimes you should just trust them.
Go ahead, Linda.
I heard Evan say something really important, and that was in middle school when you got connected with computer programming, you learned and you got excited, and then you carried it over into other areas. I think that's the piece I'm searching for in this, not raising the grade, and I know you do it here, but somehow we have to come to the formula of doing it more, and I'm not that familiar with the school. I'm ignorant, so I want to say that.
We're working on personal learning plans, so that should help.
But that's important. What Evan said and Sam. That enthusiasm, that love of learning was coming from something connected.
So let's stay focused on what the progress is on personal learning plans and see if that's going to address some of those concerns.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, we are
way over, I know. I'm sorry.
There was actually quite a lot more in
Yeah.
Noreen's report, and I'm not going to ask her to speak to it unless she wants to speak to it, but and you feel free if you want to, but I also want to ask if anybody on the board had any other questions about information in the report.
I mean, the PED thing is a huge
Yeah.
can of worms, but at the same time, I think it's important that it's being tackled. You know, I mean, when I hear the scuttlebutt on the, oh, if you're going to be in 7th grade, you have to have a, you know, from the elementary school.
Do we need like a motion or something on the grade thing?
No,
Are they looking
I
for
don't
that
think
kind of
we
support?
need-
No, okay, sorry.
You know, that
I'm
there's
sorry.
a, you know, how important is that and how distracting is that and how much does that affect students' ability to learn?
So that everybody understands what we're talking about.
Sorry, personal
learning-
electronic devices.
Personal
It's
electronic
over there on the
devices,
report.
right.
I mean, not to say that on the other side there are, you know, great educational benefit to students if used appropriately, but, you know, how much education are these students getting coming in, you know how to use them educationally and to know how to use them in a positive way. I don't really know that exists in our district enough for them to really, in 7th grade, have a good, responsible ability to cope with those devices.
Well, the Digital Wish program has, you know, really is particularly focused at not only the skills of students using electronic devices, but the morality and etiquette and the effective use of such devices.
When you cross the line into those handheld devices that have cameras and things, it takes a whole different level for them.
That has been increasingly part of the instruction. I mean, the Digital Wish has been going about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't know that the issue that we have presently addressed is real with the particular grade and so forth is really much different than the kind of developmental adventures that happen, you know, when we had paper and pencil back in the old day. It's just that now it's so pervasive electronically that it's a much more incendiary and dangerous medium. Well, and it's anonymous. It isn't anonymous if there's usually ways for us to figure that out, or the law enforcement authorities to figure it out. So, but I do think that, you know, many of us, you know, earlier in life and even now know what is the right thing to do, but whether we do it or not is another question. And I think that, you know, we have to understand the limits of training and instruction regarding the use of PEDs or any modern media, and then make the right decision.
Seems like you've got a good plan in place here.
That's what the plan's trying to do. And it, you know, like in most cases, if the group of people that you're, you know, supervising or working with can't make the right decisions, then you have to change the rules temporarily to make sure that the problem is addressed. People have to win back their trust in the fabric of society. That's what restitution's about.
So you'll keep us informed on progress and decisions around personal electronic devices, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yep.
PDAs.
Wait till we self-service here.
Oh, I don't think that'll make a whole lot of difference.
Maybe.
Because it's
Maybe.
all texting, so.
Yeah, they have Wi-Fi
Internet.
texting with the internet.
Based.
So it's not
On a positive note to the board report, or the principal's report, is on page 4. I didn't highlight this, but I will say it verbally, that following the Algebra for All, that first class, who are now in 10th grade. So if you look at so on page 4, the first column, it's the 2011-12 school year. Only 24% of our students were enrolled in algebra. And then the next year, so it was last year, it was 61% of them were enrolled in algebra, or 9th grade. Now that doesn't include students who were accelerated. So it was something like 89% of 9th graders from last year completed algebra. And I'm happy to say that this year it's even a little higher than that. But then if you look at in the bottom quadrant, on the bottom right quadrant, where it says 56% of the students are in Euclidean or college prep geometry. So those, and that's something that I am continually studying. And there's so much intervention in this you can't imagine, such as there's a non-college prep geometry class called Discovering Geometry. All those courses were held this fall. I had to go through all those class lists to make sure that they were all enrolled in Euclidean geometry in the spring, which meant changing more student schedules. It's something that I had worked on back in last June and May, and then again in August, but kids make changes in their schedules. Whatever else happens, rolling around in December, or look again, I say those kids aren't signed up. So it's just an enormous amount of hand scheduling and legwork, and yet it's still not where it should be. Now, again, this percentage, the 56%, doesn't include those who completed it. So there are also a number of 10th graders who are already in Algebra 2, so they're ahead. But it's not good that it goes down a little bit. And then on the next page, this is something that a trend I want to buck, is that it says, only 28%, that is 28% of juniors and 55% of seniors don't take a math course at all. So, not good. That's a real challenge to face, especially since our current sophomores, if they did algebra last year and then Discovering Geometry in the fall and Euclidean Geometry in the spring, that's it. 3 math credits, they're done. They don't have to do more if they don't want to. I'm happy because they have met the state requirement based on Vermont's framework of standards, but it's not the Common Core requirement, which is all the way through Algebra 2. So how we will grapple with this, we'll see when we start using the Common Core assessments aspect. But I'm glad to see the progress that we have made. Good. And I'll stop now.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's important.
Can I ask one question, Doreen? Are there any plans of offering any coding classes?
Coding? So we do offer 2 coding classes this year.
I couldn't find them anywhere.
I'll look it up in program studies. There's computer configurations and computer fundamentals. And that, Evan just left the room.
He would know, but
yeah, he would know. So I'll pull it up exactly.
So we have I hate to cut into this.
I'm sorry.
You can look that up, but we actually have a presentation from Joe Toll, who was here and just walked out, but I don't want to hold him up too much longer, so just as soon as he walks back in the room, we're going to jump to him, if that's okay.
Right.
And is Amanda coming as well? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So,
we're not quite at 8:15 here yet. So
right.
okay.
And so, if there's no other questions for Durin's looking up the thing about coding classes. But if there's no other comments or questions, let's look quick to Stephen.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll have some mercy on you, I hope. The contracts are out to the staff. They're due back on May 30th. We did, have that successful agreement with the association, so we didn't have to worry about abrogating our contractual obligations. The contracts were issued for the first time this year via APTA, the financial software accounting package that we have, and that means that once properly loaded, a push of a button, they all get issued, and they're all standardized with the step and the salary and the other particulars in terms of how teachers want to be paid, 22, 26 payments, and 20, what's another one? There are 3 choices there, 22. Anyway, so that's a big victory, and I certainly want to once again thank Frank for his leadership on that project, and there's still more to be done in that software program. And then I have also some good news and sad news. I wrote you, I believe, and announced Chris Pratt's accepting the position of superintendent over Wyndham Southwest. Chris Pratt was his 3rd year at Newbrook as a very effective I would say much love principal at Newbrook. So we're in a search process. The applications close May 23rd, and hopefully we'll conclude with a recommendation to the board in the first week in June, or second week in June. The other news from Newbrook is they have a special meeting warned for June 12th, where the public will vote on 2 articles, one for the photovoltaic cell installation to produce electricity. That'll be funded by a private contractor, guaranteed performance contract, and won't be at a cost to the taxpayers. And then the other article will be to borrow up to $150,000 to install heat exchangers in each classroom that are individually regulated by the classroom, and that's air-to-air exchange, and that'll be driven by the electricity produced by the photovoltaic cell, so that the campus is trying to go green down there. That's basically the goal. Dover's also looking at a similar thing. I don't know, they're not as far along on their project. Then another development is that Townsend, we hope some Townsend people come to the meeting, which is June 9th, because they have a special meeting to affirm the election of the officers and the decisions of the actual school district meeting on town meeting day. Twyla, you're probably aware of this, because the article, the warning wasn't exactly right, is what they're trying to do. Then we have another meeting coming up May 20th, which is a Jamaica special meeting. I just am reminding myself, no wonder I'm so busy. A special meeting on May 20th for Jamaica for the public to consider approving a $12,000 addition to the budget to support lengthening pre-K education from half day to full day. Moving on to legislation, the Act H-270, the Pre-K Act did pass. So this means that there's going to be pretty much a flat rate. We're ready for you. Flat rate to support preschool education, that is as early as ages 3. And that will be funded through the school district and then paid to the private or public provider of the parent's choice. So parents, what's unusual about this, as I understand it, is that if you live in Townsend, you could choose to go to your public pre-K, or you could choose to go to a private pre-K. And it'll be interesting to see how that works out in the end in terms of supporting the greater good for everyone. But certainly I support the expansion of pre-K availability to all parents, and this will help. I'll cut it off there and turn it over to our guests. So we're very pleased to have you here, and I understand if you don't know these people, this is Joe Toll on the left and Amanda Dixon on the right, and they recently took a professional opportunity, developed themselves a plan to go to Greece and to actually document some sites, collect some materials, and then the second half of this was to revise, develop a curriculum, and implement and use those materials gained in that travel study to benefit our students and really, I think, turn on some more engaged learners.
Welcome. Thank you.
So nothing like first-hand observation to breed enthusiasm, so that's what we've got them here for. They wanted to give you a little glimpse of what was up.
Well, we're going to kind of wing it. So I teach 7th grade English, and Joe teaches 7th grade social studies. And we have, for the last 2 years and part of this year, each taught about sort of ancient Greece, not in a unified way. So I taught the mythology and the stories.
I've done the history and the architecture, and we've never really been able to do it together. And we started this year to try to begin to put those things together.
So Ann Lindenberger was leading a trip to Greece, and we said, hey, what a great opportunity. We both teach about Greece. It'd be really fun to go. So we wrote a proposal and got it approved, and off we went. So we thought we'd start with a little clip of the project that students have done in my class for the last couple of years, which is to take one of the myths that they've studied and working with the IT guys, put together sort of a multimedia production retelling that myth. So our objective, we haven't had time to put our plan together for next year, but our objective is to use the materials and the information that we gathered on this trip to better inform our teaching next year, so that the kind of project you're about to see will be even richer in terms of connection to real places and real historical events on location.
And it's really exciting because when we came back, we started the project before we went, this multimedia project, and then we kind of finished it up when we came back, and the enthusiasm of the kids when we told them that we're going to these places, they were like, wow, and then we could come back, and then when they're looking for photographs for the backgrounds and places of the video that they're showing, we could go to our photos and actually provide them with photos that we'd taken and give them personal stories about what we saw when we were there, and stories that we had been told by the guides and had learned through the stuff that we had experienced. It was very, very cool.
So this is Hades and Persephone. These 4 7th graders don't know that you're seeing this. We didn't ask their permission. But I don't think they mind.
Don't ask, don't tell.
And Jake did one of these last year, which is really fun.
Yeah, this is at volume.
I think so.
Because I turned off the volume. It's on the top.
Right, so I'm pressing
Okay.
play.
Speakers on.
But I don't know, are the speakers on?
I don't know if they do the volume.
We'll see. Need volume.
Hello, I'm Gene Johnson. We're here at a horrific crime. Yesterday, May 3rd, 1000 BC, a young girl named Persephone disappeared mysteriously around here. What do you have to say about this, sir?
Wow, I saw the earth split open. Then this big, hairy man popped out of the ground and grabbed this girl who was picking flowers. And then this lady came over and started crying. I thought it was funny, so I started to laugh, and she turned me into a lizard.
Thank you. Now we'll show you some never-before footage of the kidnapping. We were lucky enough to have Zeus and Demeter here, all the way from Mount Olympus. Way to say about this issue.
My daughter will never survive in the dank hole Hades calls a kingdom. I need Persephone back.
My dear, calm down. Hades is the only person fit to marry our daughter. Maybe she will be happy there.
Happy? As long as she stays in the underworld, I will prevent everything from growing. Then we'll see who's happy.
Oh dear, I just hope she hasn't eaten anything while in the underworld. If she has, then she's gonna need to stay there forever.
Hey, I just got a text message from Persephone. It says, "LOL, pomegranate seeds taste so good." Then a selfie of her eating 6 pomegranate seeds. I must go show this to Demeter before she destroys the world.
Well, that was dramatic. I hope everything goes alright.
Yeah, I ate those pomegranate seeds and nobody stopped me. I am sick of you bossing me around. So I'm going to stay with Hades for half a year. 6 months, 1 for each seed I ate. Fine by me.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without.
I'm Gene.
So
Okay, no, stop. Keep going. I'm Gene Justin. 3, 2.
Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy.
Yeah.
That was nice.
So that group, I mean, the 4 kids that were part of that group sort of are an interesting makeup. I mean, we have a student who's, fully special ed, a student who's, one of our highest achievers, so they all worked incredibly well together to produce something like that. So, you had the picture of the Acropolis, the background, that was Mount Olympus. We were there. So that's sort of an example of the kind of project that they're working on and have been working on in our classes, and we're hoping next year with what we gathered on our trip that we'll be able to give them, lots more access to photos and pieces of information to insert in their movies.
Can you tell us a little bit how you merged the English and the social studies? You were talking about that before. In the story was the English and the social studies was...
So we broke the whole 7th grade up into groups, and each group got to choose whether they wanted to make a film about an actual historical event like the Olympics. So these were all like news broadcasts. So this group chose to retell a myth, but we had other groups who chose to report on the Olympics or
On the Battle of the Marathon. They did
the Trojan War, so
right.
the cause of the war, which is steeped in myth, and then the end of the Trojan War, which is historical. So it sort of ran the gamut.
Yeah, so it all in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well done. That was exciting.
So then we're, for next year with all the, I've just looking there, I have about 53 gigabytes worth of photos and film that I'm going to go through and sort out and put into some sort of story so that, I can show at different parts next year for the classes so they can, hear an expert talk about why Delphi is important, and how they talked about it as the crossroads. And it basically, they call it the umbilicus of the world because all these groups came there. Every colony that went out from, to colonize the world came to Delphi first to ask for advice, and that's helped to spread the Greek culture. And these are coming from people who are experts, and to be able to do that with the, the building in the background is, I think, pretty amazing. And, kids are super excited to be able to see it. And, they're also funny because, did you take selfies? I'm like, first of all, they've been around for a long time, and yes, I did.
I think the other thing, just from a teaching standpoint, I had this experience in college, and now again that, with respect to literature or stories, to be in the place where the story is from, it's just so exciting. My experience in college was being on the North York Moors and realizing that, Wuthering Heights was written about this place. I get it now, why it's so moody and, passionate and emotional. And same thing, to be at Delphi and think about Hercules, who, just killed his wife and his children in a, spell that he was put under by Hera, and he goes to Delphi to ask, how do I atone for these sins? What do I do next? Not what's my future going to be, what's going to happen to me down the road, but immediately, what do I do? Give me some guidance for the next step. Being in that place, it sort of becomes.
Now you can bring that back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I'll think about these stories and teach them in a totally different way.
In a place where no wars were fought over.
Right.
People from all over the world would come there and meet and talk. And she took questions one day a month. So they had to hang out and talk to each other for a long period of time and learn from each other. It was pretty cool. And I've got pictures of Ann Lanneberger talking in front of one of the theaters there about how the theater was constructed, and pictures of you talking about a New Yorker article about new studies of the the frieze and the Parthenon when we're there in front of the recreations of it. You can look at the pictures in the background.
Were students with you when you went, or you?
So there were high school students and one
Oh,
middle
not
school
middle
student,
school,
but not
yeah.
any of our current students.
We're bringing it back to them.
Right.
Yep.
Right. They all wanted to go.
Yes, they did. I said fundraising, lots of fundraising.
Well, maybe they'll get a chance, if not there somewhere.
Yeah, no, they might get a chance.
That was exciting.
So thank you for making it possible.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming and
Thank you for coming
sharing
out.
tonight. Sorry it's so late.
That's all right. Thanks for having us. Anytime.
I want to add that while Greek mythology was drilled into my own education for years, so there's, I think I knew more about Greek myths than my own religion. That fell out of favor in the last 15 years. So when my daughter was in 8th English, she had to start learning this stuff about a month before the test, pumping English teachers for information about, well, what did Hades do, and what's the difference between Kronos and Uranus, and how hard that was to keep in her head when she took the test. So I'm incredibly grateful that we teach it to the extent that we do in our school at also such an impressionable age, which is then referred to as they go on to advanced literature that has all these Greek references that they can then go back to. Remember when you were in 7th grade and learn these fundamentals.
Well, we just had kind of a mind-blowing moment this past week. We were reading A Midsummer Night's Dream in 7th grade, which is filled with allusions and characters from mythology. And I said, Shakespeare studied what you guys have studied. And they went, whoa, whoa, really? It's like, yeah, you guys are in the club.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Can I just pull this up?
Hopefully it's going to be hard to talk about.
Just close it.
Well,
I just had a couple of things.
good night.
Good night.
So I wanted to call your attention to I mentioned before about the awards of the two principals, and I went up to the State House with them, and they got to hear their proclamations read. And it was quite a memorable experience. One of the legislators was retiring, made an announcement along a little bit of a speech. And there were students from Greenwood School. You may not be aware, it's a school, private school specializing in young male students mostly. Are they co-ed now? I can't, I've forgotten. Anyway, they were all guys, and they had memorized the Gettysburg Address. That's one of the things you have to do there. It's one of the challenges schools. So they opened up the session. One of the fellows reciting it, then another one reciting it, and they did it together. Anyway, it was quite, and people had their scores that were reading it along with them. It was very impressive and very well delivered. Then I wanted to commend the Journey East program here too. If anybody's seen it, it was a fabulous show last Friday, a week show, and then today it's being done. Our students, I don't know, are you one of those shows too, Janina? No?
I'm not, no.
Right, okay. I know you were filming or involved in some way
Yeah,
with the
I'm
project.
visual.
Yeah. But they were over Townsend today, and it was reported that the students, Tom Connor commented, the students were just amazingly attentive at Leland, at Townsend for this show. And it was not surprising to Deborah Leggett, the principal, because Townsend had just had this in-resident experience of the circus. I don't know if you're aware of that too, but they had somebody come and have the kids learn how to be performing in a circus. It was entirely inclusive. Every single child in the school had a part in this circus show. It was really fabulous, including the most limited. One young student has no capacity to walk or sit on his own, and was also a very important part of the show, and was really very pleased and smiling to be participating. People are so impressed that donations have already been given to make sure it happens again next year. And then there are then Heather Sperling was recognized as farm-to-school teacher at Newbrook, where they have the garden going and they're trying to grow the food to cook. And they did a big feast last fall, and that program continues. So that's another recognition. And I think, although you're on the Leland Grade Board, I want to call your attention to the things that are happening in elementary schools, because those are the students that we're going to get.
Any questions for Stephen?
Thank you.
No?
Okay, I got a couple of things. Be a brief report. First would be, if I could ask you for a motion, it would be to approve the food service bid that we would like to award. This is the time of year we try to do that and send the results, the minutes of the board meeting to the Child Nutrition Office. It was time for a 3-year bid, so we did conduct the process. You may have seen the advertisement. Today was the bid opening, and we would like to award the bid to the Abbey Food Group. So I'm glad to answer any questions, but if I could ask for a motion after we discuss it, I'd appreciate it.
Any questions for Frank?
Who else bid on it?
We had one other vendor join us in the walkthrough, but they declined to bid.
So the Abbey Food Group was the only bidder.
They were the only bidder.
Oh, let's go with the.
Are they within our budget number?
They are, and we've noticed higher participation rates. I don't know if our students want to share with us any insight, but over the last 3 years, I know Doreen has asked for a lot of quality improvements, and I think that there's been a committee and certainly a commitment. We have a new chef the last year, I think, and it seems that things have been improving. So, I don't know, Doreen, do you have any other comments? Quality of the system?
I'd say it's much better than it's ever been since I'm here. So, there's a new staff in the kitchen. I think they're trying very hard. The complaints about the cafeteria have gone way down, and the praise exists. I mean, that usually doesn't happen in school, but people have taken notice and happy with the food. A lot more staff eating here too.
Oh, good.
So the students concur?
Yeah, well, they always think the food should be better, in my experience. Sam, are you on the environmental committee?
No, Ms. Nazio's thing?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
the first one.
Do you want to speak to that at all? Because they just...
We're not really that organized yet.
Okay.
Pretty much what we said at the assembly is what we've gotten so far.
But one of the areas that you guys are taking on is quality of food, local war in the cafeteria?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
Different committee maybe.
I hope so.
No, or waste in the cafeteria, recyclables,
that was
or...
more along the lines we spoke about.
Excellent.
I would just add one other thing, and that is, I can't speak for any of the other vendors, but when in the walkthrough, it was very evident that the Abbey Group has brought in a substantial amount of their own equipment, and we are not in a position, as you know, as a result of our last board budget vote, to make much of a difference in that, which is unusual. Most high schools provide their own coolers, their own storage facilities, their own preparation utensils, but the Abbey Food Services provided all of that for us, and they are doing it at a very competitive cost. So I think we're fortunate that they are making the commitment they have made to us.
That's great.
I'll move to approve the Abbey Food Group bid.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? If not, ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion to approve the bid going to Abbey Food Group, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
Okay. The other thing is just a brief verbal financial report, and I'll give you a written one at your next meeting. We have just a couple months left of the fiscal year, and a couple of the highlights. It's going to reflect what you heard from Doreen in terms of the need, and we will see a deficit in the expenditure budget this year. It is primarily around student support services. And for example, our special education out-of-district budget was 171,000. We're projecting maybe close to 300,000 as an actual, and this is associated with students that we're not able to provide service for here, and therefore are paying private providers. The other area that we'll see spending in addition to the plan was in the counseling area. There was, the school struggled to address some very serious issues earlier. Fortunately, Durin had written a grant that did bring a substantial amount of resources to help us support those services, but that there will be a variance in our plan there. As you know, when we do spend more on special education, we get reimbursed more. So it's not a significant. I don't think we'll see a significant variation when we're all done and we add up our revenues, our expenses, and then look at the impact on fund balance. There's an awful lot of transactions that do happen in the last couple of months. So we're going to have those organized and accounted for, and I will give you a report. And I'm sure before I move on, we'll have the usual very good estimate of what our fiscal year end will look like, and you'll have a good sense of the starting point in terms of financial resources for the budget process in the new year. I also did mention, I think earlier, that we did have a favorable variance in our tuition, regular ed tuition. We were pleased to see that we do have more students than we had budgeted, and that again will help contribute to offset a little bit of the deficit. And then one other comment, just regarding what's happening in the legislature. I don't think the governor has actually signed the funding law bill. But just an update, Stephen may have sent it around to the boards. There is some relief on the statewide property tax. The tax commissioner and the governor were recommending $1 back in November when we did our preliminary budgets. It's down to 98 cents. So that's a favorable development. But I don't think it's law yet. So we. Right. So I will be revisiting the revenue assumptions in the next couple of weeks, and then submitting the budget to the Agency of Education and the tax department as it's required end of May, and we will have tax rates going out to the town offices by the tax department to fund it. The fiscal year 15 budget will have revenue, additional tax revenue, to fund the prior year deficit that we talked about last year at this time. Any questions?
The memo Frank refers to, I sent to you Saturday morning from Brad James. If you didn't get it, let me know.
Okay. If there's no questions for Frank? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Career Center.
Yeah, I'll be really quick, because I know, because I've got 2 meetings to report on. We've had several groups present to us down there, and we had the food service, which was fascinating. They run a street foods course that brings in all international, which does education. I've been very impressed with their with their basic academic instruction in these courses. Then we saw performing arts, which was absolutely amazing. They talked about team building, technical productions. They also have 2 college programs right under performing arts with students from all over the world. In engineering, they've introduced new geometry and construction courses. It's all building this academic firm base for these kids. And they've been winning a lot of awards, and one of our own kids, Jonah, you say Koch, K-O-C-H from Townsend? Cook. Okay, won a silver medal in a statewide competition from the Career Center, Skills USA Vermont. Over 1,000 kids participated, and he took a silver in mobile robotics. So that's quite an accomplishment for our kids. Today, we heard several rather encouraging things. This Career Center is getting a $146,000 grant next year on a Perkins plan. And there was a consultant from Southern Regional Education Board that's going to be coming in. It's going to cost the center $7,500, but it's going to have a lot to do with professional development of teachers there, and again, in this academic area. So they also are very encouraged. They told me that 15 kids are coming down, are already committed to coming down next year. That's higher than usual. They're very pleased. And they did invite any board members that wanted to come down and go through their programs. It's well worth it, and you'll get the best lunch in town. So, that's it.
And the professional development has to do with math, so that's a particular interest to us, and I'll advise Doreen about
So
that.
lots going on down there.
Later on, if you want to check out my tie, I wore this tie
Oh,
for
yeah.
a purpose.
It's
This
white.
tie is actually, I call it my spaghetti tie. It's made out of wood, but it was made by a shop teacher in the shop at Whitingham way back when. And the fellow's from India. He saw my wooden ties. I have a number of them. So he made this one for me. And it's really quite a piece of craftsmanship if you want to look at it later on. Thank you for indulgence out there in TV land.
Okay, any questions for Lyndall?
I love doing this. Thank you for the assignment.
Thank you for participating for us. We appreciate it. Thanks for the report back. Okay, old business red committee report. Very briefly, we met on the 7th. Didn't make any decisions because we met prior to the legislature adjourning. So we're meeting now on the 29th. Sorry, the 29th.
You better add it to the end of your calendar there on the agenda.
And we'll talk about what our next steps are when we meet on the 29th at 7 here at Leland and Gray. So there's really nothing much to report there. You want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, I want to add one thing regarding Brookline, that an article has been suggested by the committee to stipulate that the school and property of Brookline should be transferred to Brookline Town for $1. And
We've got our consultant looking into that and following up.
right, but it is included in the draft we have now, if you go online.
Okay. Any questions? Comment? Okay. School board planning session, we've been talking about this for quite some time and been delaying it with our delayed budget approval. So we should really make a decision about what we want to do here and set a date. What's your pleasure? In this case, we probably would bring in an outside consultant. We talked about revisiting our goals because it was about 3 years or 4 years ago now, even that we wasn't it 4 years ago now?
Ray Prue. I don't know. Wasn't that Ray Prue?
Yeah, it was Ray. Who I just met with today, by the way. He looks absolutely wonderful. But he isn't doing any consulting anymore, just so you know, before anybody gets their hopes up. But there are plenty of other consultants around to come in and help us with looking at, or I think we discussed looking at pre-budgeting, addressing, reviewing our goals and seeing whether they're still relevant, whether we want to update them, which is highly likely, and looking at the future at Leland and Gray, knowing the challenges that we're going to be heading into with reduced enrollment and increased costs to be able to maintain our programs. And, I think the fact that we struggled to get our budget passed this year is another thing that we probably could have as a central part of our focus as well. So,
How much time you want? That's the question you want to give to this.
the last time we did one of these, we did an all-dayer on a weekend. We did a Saturday from like 9 to 3, I think we did.
I think that's appropriate.
Are people able to give that? Don't everybody speak at once. Some people are shaking their head no.
I don't see these things ever being very productive, honestly.
Well,
enrollment's going down, and we're going to have to cut, and that's the future. And you don't need a consultant to come in and tell us that. As we have less kids, we're going to need less teachers down the road. And it's going to be a difficult thing that we have to do as we have to do it. But I don't know how a consultant's going to help us with it.
It's not specifically about a consultant coming in, Howie. It's about talking about what our mutual interests and concerns and thoughts are. And I would venture to say that the last one, which I don't think you were on the board when we did, were you? Or you weren't participating in it at my house, were you?
Not at your house.
No, because you weren't there when because it was Gian who was there from
Three
Wyndham.
River, we did one.
Yeah, that's Wyndham Central, I think. But Leland and Greg did one, and I think we got an awful lot out of it.
It was so powerful, the wind blew our goals in the pond, or pool.
Oh, that kind of hour.
Do you remember that?
No, I wasn't there,
Yeah.
but
Sorry.
But I do.
No, it was actually great having the facilitator. That way we all could participate, as opposed to one person having to step out and trying to be unbiased, really. Instead, the board members were fully there. Howie, it led my work for the next 3 years. Whenever, today we had our 7th grade retention, acceleration, promotion meeting. The basis, the school board has said that we challenge students by readiness, not by age. That was the basis for the meeting. That would not have happened without the retreat.
Okay.
I mean, you've been able to empower me with your goals to do the work in the school.
We're here to represent our communities, and so
that's very powerful.
It is.
What Corinne's saying.
All right, then.
I
withdraw my objection.
There's a lot of discussion to be had about what, if we are going into cutting the budget significantly over the coming years, what are we looking to cut? I mean, what are our priorities and what are areas that we just can't afford to sustain? And that's a big question, and it's not a friendly question to the community or to students or anybody. And we started that when we were working towards getting this budget passed, but I think that's the continuing dialogue we should have.
And I think it should be long-term, 5 years out even, because we can project out that far, what we're going to look like, and so I agree. So, sounds like we're in agreement of doing it. Now we got to come up with a time when we can get, I really would like to see every board member here. And if we can't have every board member,
I'm not going to be able to do an all-day anything during the summer.
Not even on a weekend.
No, I work every weekend.
Okay. So what about other people? I mean, we've done them in the past with 2 evenings overnight. We keep somebody overnight and do two nights in a row. Is what
That I can do.
We've done those. They're maybe not as effective as doing one long one, but.
Well, if it gets everybody here, I think it's important to get full participation.
What do you guys think?
Are you guys around in the summer?
Oh, you.
Or are we talking about summer? Yeah.
Actually, we're talking about just as soon as we can get
Soon as we
together.
get going.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
So, you guys want us to go?
Yeah. Aren't you part of the board?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. That's a big thing.
I think that's what you signed up for, but.
Yeah.
No, nobody's forcing anybody to go, but we would love to have your input.
Okay.
We'll feed you.
Oh.
Okay.
Probably go.
What do you think?
I can do either. Given enough notice, I can rearrange my schedule to do either a Saturday or 2 nights. If it ups participation of board members to do it 2 nights in a row, it may not be as productive, but let's get as many voices as we can.
What do you think?
Like you said.
Okay. So look at your calendars. I mean, seriously, if we don't have a couple of dates to throw out to a consultant to come in, we're not going to be able to do this. I know it's.
I have a calendar. I know my Saturday schedule.
Stephen?
Well, I'm just saying it's not.
No, it can't be in May.
It can't be in May. I think we got to go to June, folks.
How about the week after graduation?
I'm taking a group to the Truck Institute. Dylan's joining you on that.
She's a clean slate right now.
Dartmouth for the week retreat.
And then after that is the holiday week. So.
I'm
glad you bring that.
How about the first week in June?
First week in June, what's that?
How about the first
You mean
week in
the
June?
first week in July?
No.
Oh, the
That's
first week
holiday.
in June.
I'm going to be in Seattle.
When you in Seattle? When you coming back? Or?
The 8th.
Oh, so, I was looking at the
How
9th
about
to
the,
the 13th.
how about the,
But I'm one person. If
Ninth
it goes
and
for everybody
13th.
else, go.
how about the 9th and 10th?
Yeah, that I
We have a board meeting on the 10th.
That's what I mean.
Sounds good. So you don't
We
double
do it,
up.
we do an abbreviated board
In
meeting.
June?
In June.
Yeah, June 9th, 10th.
I can't do 9.
You can't do the 9th. I can't do the 11th. I have an all-day
I'd
retreat
have
that
to
day.
miss, I'd have to miss town. But that's-
Okay.
All right, yeah. Does it- yeah,
Are
that'd be
are you
back
guys
to back
mobbed
and
the
really
week of
make it work.
vacation? I mean, week of graduation, I'm assuming you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Start throwing out some dates, folks.
Sure.
If
What
I'm
about
the
a
only-
Sunday? A long Sunday, would that work instead of a Saturday for people?
I mean,
Can't do Sunday.
Doesn't matter.
I'm fine.
Mike can't do Sunday. If I'm the only one that week in June, go ahead, I'll pick up.
Well,
No, we're trying to get everyone here.
everybody here.
I like your idea, Emily. How about 7 and 8th of July?
Yeah, that's okay for me.
It's better for me.
I'll be out of town.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Yeah, I wouldn't be available in July till after the 16th.
Well. When do you leave? First?
The last day I'll probably be in Townsend is, I mean, with the Tuck Institute. So I'm really gone from the 22nd of June until July 16th. Can I say it on camera? It's my 25th wedding anniversary this summer, so whatever I should do for that.
Nice. Congratulations.
So
Okay,
it's
so-
a major happening.
Throw out some other dates.
How about the week of July 21st?
We're
I'm
getting,
gone.
we're getting into summer. I think it's going to be really
Yeah,
tough
I'm
if we go
gone.
into summer, honestly.
That June 10th looked good. But that was not good for you, right, Lyndall?
No, that's fine. I'm back the 8th.
No, Jeremy couldn't be there on the 9th.
Oh,
Not the 9th or the 10th, right?
I know. Those June weeks are a mess for me.
Yeah.
I mean, until the school lets out.
So we said we couldn't do the week after. Somebody told me they couldn't do the week after graduation.
I could do that.
That was when Stephen and Jordan were
Oh.
gone, right?
Well, I can do the Sunday, the 22nd.
yeah, I can do that.
I could do that.
I can do that.
I can.
Chorus. Do that.
My goodness.
We're gonna have to meet at Tuck by 4 or something like that, 4 or 5, but it's better than,
I don't know if we can get anybody to come in on Sunday.
that's another thing.
And we'll miss Mike.
Mike's out.
Mike's out on Sunday.
Yeah. So let's go back to the first week in June again. You said you weren't going to be here.
Yeah, but I'll pick it up from somewhere.
It's either that or we wait till September. I think, because I really
Okay,
don't think we can book.
what's the dates in the, what date you thinking of? Emily, I lost track. It wasn't the 9th and 10th, there was something before that, right?
I'm not thinking of anything specific. I'm just looking at my calendar and trying to hit every week. It looks like we can't do the week of the 16th because that's graduation week. We can't do the week after because it looks like a lot of people are gone. The 9th and 10th isn't going to work. And that's getting close to graduation after
Well,
that.
go to, I'm the only one that can't come. I'm gone the 2nd to the 8th for grandson's graduation out there, going to
Yeah.
college. So do it then, sometime.
Look at the 1st.
Yeah, I'm here the 1st.
That's okay. commitment on the
I
third.
can't do it on the
Oh,
first.
and
But I
Mike,
could do it I could do it any other day. So.
Another possibility is Friday, June 20th. Is that out? Which is the day before graduation, but
that's okay.
it's the teachers are done. Oh, for you, Mom, it'd be terrible for you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, we're going to what, June, that first week in June has a second, a third. Third is impossible for you, right, Joe?
Yes.
Fourth, if we're talking about the evening, that is when I'm doing Scholar Leaders Banquet for middle school
How
kids.
early can you get here if you come?
You're talking about?
Folks, anybody?
Oh.
Are you eating?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just wondering whether we can do like an extended, could we start at like 3 or 4 and go to 8 and make it just one night?
I could do that.
I might be a little late, but I can do it.
Yeah, I can't do before 6. Or until like 6 when the arrows get there. If it was the 10th of June.
Until school gets out.
Until school gets out.
Yeah.
After that, I'll be.
Well, maybe we should just look for September. But, I mean, this is going to help inform budget process, and budget process, honestly, needs to start in September probably, so.
Well, what are people's plans for August when we start getting back to thinking about school? Any chance there? You can mostly take a vacation or what?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
You know, summer's hard. The last time we did one of these, we did it in September, on a Saturday.
Well, let's go for September. As long as we get the process started.
All right, so the
Before the budget.
first Saturday in September is the 6th.
Mike can't do Saturdays. We're not talking about
Oh,
Saturdays, we're
I'm
talking
sorry.
about 2 nights.
Can we do 8 and 9? Do the board meeting?
It's okay for me.
8 and 9 could work, yeah.
September 8th and 9th.
Start at,
September 8th and 9th.
Provide.
we're back in school then, Jeremy. Is it 6 o'clock for you? Is that the
Oh.
earliest to start? Or what?
But yeah, September's easier because I'm not coaching sports on the top of teaching.
Oh,
So right now I'm
So if we
stuck
could
with
start at 5?
Kiwi
We start at
baseball
5 or
on top of
something?
teaching.
Can we try to start at 5 or
I can start at 5 in September. The 9th and 10th?
the 8th and,
8th and 9th?
I think we're going to the 8th and 9th, the Monday, Tuesday, right?
Long way off, anything can happen.
Yeah.
So we'll do an abbreviated board meeting that night too, is that,
Yeah.
I don't know what goes on in September, I can't remember, but probably can.
We can do another meeting,
Special
another
board
meeting.
meeting on the 23rd.
Okay,
Okay.
it's starting at 5 and it's on
5 to
5 to
8:30 or
5 to 8:30?
On the 8th and 9th?
Yeah.
September.
5 to 8:30 is all right if we have
So-
something to eat while we're doing it.
We'll have to do 2 nights of something to eat.
Yeah.
You want to do it elsewhere, or you want to do it, well, we'll decide that
We'll
later.
decide
so
that
far
later,
away.
let's not. Yeah.
All right,
But we would like the students there, is that what I heard from the
if
group?
if at all possible, at least one or more of them would be great. We'll be here.
Yeah, our date is Monday, September 8th, 5 to 8:30. And then again on the 9th, it's a Tuesday.
And that one starts at 5 too?
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
this is tentative.
I'll send over my
Let's put it that way
regrets.
first, and we'll find. Okay.
We should be able to get somebody to come in without advance notice there.
Yeah.
No problem. Okay, that's set. Consent agenda?
I'd like to pull out one of the
Okay.
2. For the minutes of the 24th, that includes a list of members of the public, and I took those names and the best spelling I could come up with. So if anybody knows these people and I've made a mistake on the spelling,
And correct them right now?
I guess we've got to.
Does anybody know? I mean, there are 11 from Townsend.
Mike, Twyla, you got any ideas?
We also had,
I'm looking.
That's Rick Hagee.
oh yeah. It's not Hoffman, it's Heggie.
It was Ken Hoffman.
Oh, Ken Hoffman, that's
Ken
right.
Hoffman was here
That's
and
right,
Rick
he was
Hagee was here.
Hagee is spelled
H-E-G-E, and then Ken Hoffman.
H-A-G-E.
H-E-G-E.
Oh, H-E.
Yeah, so it's Rick Hagee and Ken Hoffman. We mushed them into one guy.
H what?
Can you find that, Peter?
Oh, and Craig Hunt was here too.
4/8/14?
That's right, he was.
And Craig Hunt was also here.
Was this on the 24th or on the 8th?
24th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
24.
Well, that was the night that,
That was our information.
right.
Right.
The only one I knew there was Kevin Hoffman.
It's the names that you know.
They lived past you, right?
I don't know why.
This is a document, late, whatever.
March or April 24th?
Oh, Perkins.
How about the rest of these towns and people?
Wiseman's right.
Oh yeah, that's my dad. He was here. I forgot. Forgot my own father. Ed Druke. That Ed D was Druke.
Druke, D-R-U-K-E, huh?
Yeah.
Wasn't that Emily's name?
Used to be.
That's what I mean.
Sorry?
Can you give me the date of this again?
The date?
Yeah.
It's April 24th. Now, the problem there is Peter doesn't have them, right? They just came from you, Bruce, right, to
your office.
To my office. Okay.
Allison's got.
Right.
So it was also, you could also include, you need to also include Blake and Helen Prescott. They were also here.
I think you just list them as corrections in your own notes for tonight, Peter, and then we'll go back and get the electronic version and correct it.
So did you get those corrections, Bruce, so you can email them to?
Me?
What's Hoffman's first name?
I'm sorry, Ken.
Ken Hoffman.
Ken Hoffman.
Oh, you signed it.
Maybe if he takes it, it's easier, Peter.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, Peter, let him take it, and then he'll email it to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, you got any other names?
You got
there
the Prescotts? You got Craig Hunt?
Two Prescotts.
Blake and Helen?
Yep.
Okay.
And Rick Hagee.
I don't know who all.
And Ken.
Walter Meyer here?
No. I don't think that's right. That's Townsend. We're drawing a
Well,
blank
they're
on the
just
one.
not famous, that's all.
If anybody thinks of any other, email it to,
Yeah, and as I told the Townsend board last night, you can always correct the minutes later on if you have to,
Yeah.
if there's something else significant.
is there any other corrections or changes to the minutes from April 24th? Or we can do them together. Well, let's do
No.
April 24th.
Second.
If not, I need a motion to approve the minutes as corrected of April 24th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of April 24th as corrected with the members of the, as the members of the public were corrected. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we need to move April 8th since we pulled.
Can we just
We do consent agenda on the 8th.
move to approve the consent agenda then?
Yep.
Which are the minutes of April 8th?
Yep.
Right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Bills and payroll
Move to approve the bills and pay orders.
totaling $938,167.98. It's been moved. Is there a second, Howie?
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by the two guys who reviewed them. I'm asking if there's any questions or comments or corrections while we've got
None.
Frank in the room. None? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Who seconded?
Abstentions?
Howie.
did. Somebody hand this to Peter, please. Okay,
Do we have other?
we have on here other.
Do we have other?
I don't think
No,
so.
you just have to come up with other if you have any. but
Nope.
Hearing
We
no
don't.
other, we're not.
Executive session, I don't believe we have one.
Nope.
That means adjournment after you look at the list and also add in May 29th
7 o'clock at
7
the...
o'clock at Leland and Gray is the red meeting. Policy committee is meeting still, and they'll meet before our next meeting, is that correct?
Right, and the policy, oh, wait a minute. Jeez, we didn't do that. Can we, under other?
Yes, we can.
Bruce,
As soon as I find it.
take it away. This is important.
We should put,
We should have put it at the top.
this up here is supposed to say administrative and board reports, and we should also put policy
Yes.
here for the next agenda. Because Career Center is also a board report. Don't forget graduation, everybody, June 21st.
Soon.
Ready?
Yep.
We reviewed the several of these policies, older policies that were required, and the committee recommends to the board to warn D11 as a new version, E8 as a new version, and F7 as a new version. And we recommend, after review, to keep the original D12 as already exists.
I'm sorry, was that D or B? D12?
D is in dog.
D12.
Could you read them again?
D11, E8, F7. We need to warn them with revisions. And D12, I guess there is no action, is there?
No, the action is that you formally reviewed
We
them,
did
and
review
you're
them.
continuing them. The board's vote would be to continue the language as presently in effect.
So that one doesn't need to be warned, but the other three do.
Right.
So can you make sure copies are sent to us with noting any changes in them?
I'll do that.
Because the board should certainly review at least take a look at the policies.
Yep.
We're going to adopt new ones. Okay.
Right.
So,
And just so you know, the formality, you warn it, you could have a meeting as soon as 10 days later, but if we just go month to month, so the next meeting, you'll be asked to approve these, adopt these changes. So that's what Emily's saying.
So
It's
Bruce-
important that you look them over.
so Bruce made the motion. I'm assuming
Second.
Bruce, that was the motion,
Yes.
and Mike seconded it. Okay, so we've moved to warn D11, E8, and F7. Any questions, comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion to warn those three policies, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. You will see those in your email very shortly. Make sure you review them before the next meeting. And Stephen, you'll see that they're posted.
Yes, and can we have a motion to formally review D8, continue it as presently in effect? It's on prevention
D12?
of employment, D12. It's prevention of employment harassment, employee harassment.
So moved.
And that's the same. Okay.
Same language.
Okay, it's been moved by Mike.
Second.
Seconded by Howie. Any comments, questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Thank you.
I want to thank the committee for their work. We probably take 4 more meetings, we'll get it done.
Great. Perfect. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
It's a race. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sure it's whoever seconded it was the other one. That was Mike.
Did pretty well, Mike, yeah.